Good evening, everyone. This is Marsha Metzger with Parents on the Level, and we are here to bring a special treat for you tonight as we are looking at a lot of different systems in schools, as you know. But this particular one is another expose of how AI is working in our schools. We're particularly interested in the framework portrait of a graduate tonight, and we are going to discuss this with a very special guest. I want to talk about her for just a second. So, I just want you to know that in an era of rapid change, complex challenges, and sometimes competing narratives in public education, we need voices that are deeply rooted in real classrooms, diverse communities, and an unwavering commitment to truth. And that truth is that we're looking at will prioritize students and families and integrity above all else. And that's what makes me so excited to introduce to you tonight Christina Boggess, because she is really on the cutting edge of a lot of this information as a state school board member. Recently, she has attended the NASB conference, which is the National Association of State School Board Educators, and she has just a lot to say about how we are really on track for a lot of assessments. I mean, we've always had assessments, but these are going to be done differently, and they are grading things that are highly, highly subjective. So what we want to do is go ahead and talk about her and introduce her, as well. I mean, I already kind of have, but what I want to show you too is her state skills, how she is introduced on her website with the Utah State Board of Education. Christina, your background here is just amazing to me. You
Thank
have
you.
been through elementary levels,
Mhm,
you've been in rural areas, you've been in
mhm,
high school areas, and you've been
mhm.
in cities. My goodness. So tell us just a little encapsulated version of and just give us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Well, goodness, as an educator, this is year 25, and I have been just about everywhere. I started my career in a small K-12 school district that served less than 200 students. And it graduated from there. I went to a school district in a suburb of Omaha, Nebraska, and then eventually went into the major metro there in Omaha and decided that was a little too big for me. And I transferred out into a community of about 6,000 people. And then my husband's job brought us to Utah, and go figure, I'm in Salt Lake City. And
Wow.
I get to teach in the greater Salt Lake Valley here. And a few years ago, I had just randomly sent a message to one of the sitting board members at the time. I was super frustrated after I had moved to Utah because I thought I was moving to like this pinnacle of conservatism, and I found out very quickly that something was very wrong here. And
Mhm.
I found that out as an educator inside the system, and then it kind of trickled into my experience as a parent. And so I had just sent this message to a sitting school board member, and I just said, "Hey, you give me hope. Thanks for all you do." And I was thrust in less than 6 months to speaking before our state legislature in closed caucuses, into speaking at other things that I just never thought I would find myself in. It was definitely a God thing because it wasn't something that I had planned. And I was asked to run for school board, and I ran in 2022, and I took the oath at the beginning of 2023, and I have served on the board for 3 years. So I don't know if that gives you a nutshell. Is that what you wanted, Marcia?
Yes, yes, and it's just great. And I know some of our, guests or some of our viewers
Mhm.
tonight, they already know about your recent post. You want to just get that out of the way, what's happened with you lately? Because I tell my audience all the time, public schools right now, you need to get your kids out if you can at
Mhm.
all, if you can. So tell them a little bit, just briefly, what's happened lately, and then we will jump into the NASB conference information.
Well, I had just, it wasn't a decision that I made lightly. I have really evaluated the state of education in our state and the state of what I call a return on investment.
Mm.
In our home, we talk about what's the return on that investment? Is your time being spent in the most valuable and effective ways? And my time on the board has been something that I couldn't explain really if I tried. It's been wrought with, first front row seat to corruption, front row seat to crazy, front row seat to some of the most aggressive spiritual abuse I've ever seen in my lifetime outside of the church. And when you are in those spaces and you can recognize it, you go, that's not acceptable behavior. And what what I have shared with my peers is that if this happened in a formalized workplace, people would
Mhm.
be terminated, there would be investigations, it would be like big hubbub. But because we are elected members, they just treat it like it's normal. But it's not normal behavior, and it's certainly not acceptable behavior. And so I had decided with my husband and my family that I was not going to run again. I was not going to seek reelection. We made this prayerfully, we made it consciously, and we evaluated, the time that I put in, which is a lot. It's about a job and a half. I put about 60 hours a week into my service on the board, and then I work another full-time job. So it is a huge investment of my time and of our family's time, and I had decided not to seek reelection. And when I just quietly, I'm not really active on social media. If you look, there's like this big long pause because it's just not who I am. I
Right.
think that the world's problems are not solved on the internet. But I knew that I had to tell my constituents that I was not seeking reelection and why I was not seeking reelection. And so I just put out a statement, and it was bold and it was unfiltered, but it was kind, and it blew up after
Well,
about
the
6 hours.
truth has a way of doing that. And I mean, I just salute you for sharing your heart and because this is what parents need to hear. And I have tried to impress on teachers that I know we need to stand on you know,
Mhm.
for our children. We need to stand for truth and say, no, we're not that you are out of your lane teaching things that parents should be teaching,
Mhm.
from sexuality to gender identity to I have found it all. I have found it all in my time since I have been investigating school curriculum and these SEL videos. I've seen it all. So, anyway, I congratulate you. And I know you've seen a whole lot, but there's no telling what the Lord has in store for you in the future. And I think
Thank
that you're
you.
off to a great start. So, well,
Thank
one
you.
thing I want to do before we jump into NASB, and I already kind of passed this, and my audience has seen this particular screen probably the past, what, 4 videos, I think. But this is Securely. Have you heard of Securely? It's a surveillance tool used in the schools, but it also has, this is Securely Discern. It's the artificial intelligence that's used for the data-driven schools. So these are the different frameworks they're measuring. And then if you can look in the little tiny letters down at the bottom of the screen, it says, and more frameworks coming online soon. And I'm sure they're cooking up more and more of them. But you do
Mhm.
see where it says portrait of a graduate right there in that
Mhm.
final row, right in the middle. So this is one of the frameworks that are being measured. And folks, when you're looking at all of these different things, it would take, I mean, people don't understand how much time it takes to fully explain every framework in the schools. So when the kids use this TLDR acronym for too long, didn't read, that is the design of many of these frameworks right now. So you don't have the time to learn it. You won't understand it when you're speaking with an administrator about it because it's all just gobbledygook to us because they speak in acronyms and they speak in ways that make you feel demeaned and like you're just less than because you don't understand all these things. So I'm thinking that the more we expose this and each framework, the better off we're going to be as a society because parents need to know what their children are subjected to. So this right here is a lot of the frameworks. This is the backbone of the school, and that's how they describe that in this particular video. So people need to understand what's going on there. So, all right. So NASB, that was back in October.
Hmm.
What did you think overall?
I think that in many ways it was a vendor conference. And and by that, I mean I actually went to sincerely learn and really look at, in particular, the math instruction that's becoming very big right now. We've seen this great increase in Mississippi in reading and literacy, and I really was wanting to look at the math, and that was a big push for the conference was math. So I had gone to see these things, and it really turned out to be more of a vendor event where they're trying to sell you things or sell you on different things as opposed to presenting different things and then debating the merit of those things in real time, which is what I had expected it to be. It wasn't that. It was really a sales pitch from many different directions. There were some seminars that were very good. Others, like the one we're going to talk about today, just shocked the living bejeebers out of me. It was really, really crazy. But NASB, again, it's the National Association of State Boards of Education, and you know they had headline speakers that I didn't even know would be there, like Linda Darling Hammond.
Oh,
And and if you don't know that name, you should know that name because when that is headlining a national conference, we're heading in a bad direction.
absolutely. Audience, if you've been listening to me for a while, you've heard about Linda Darling Hammond. She's no darling. She is the president of the California State Board of Education, and she has the Learning Policy Institute. She was Obama's and Biden's transition coordinator. Is that what she was? Isn't that what they called her? For both of their administrations. Not only that, she took time in the Rand Corporation for over a decade, also with Columbia University Teachers College, where a lot of this indoctrinating material comes from. Along with in Illinois, she moved there and she was with Castle for quite some time. She is board member emeritus with Castle, which is where social and emotional learning is pretty much graded and just pushed globally. So, yeah, Linda Darling Hammond, if she was your headliner there, that's chilling. So, I'm glad you mentioned that. Very good. A lot of my
Yeah.
people, I've got a write up on her, I think, in both of my books, Parent Navigator 1 and 2. So, yeah, that's very interesting. So you took some pictures of screens, which we're going to scroll through. And whenever, as you're talking, if you want to just tell me to go ahead and forward it on, I'll be glad to. But tell me
I would be happy
how
to.
this particular conference started out, or this particular session started for you.
Well, I think if I could just back up just a little bit,
Sure, sure, go
I,
ahead.
I think not necessarily on the screen. I like the screen, but I just want to back up a little bit. Portrait of a Graduate, when I ran for office, was a hot topic. It was a
Yes.
super hot topic. What do you think about Portrait of a Graduate? When I debated for my seat on the board, I had to actually answer questions about Portrait of a Graduate. And one of the things I said was that I think cookie cutter kids, spelled with an A or with a K rather, ends up with communism. And if you think about the oh, I'm losing it in my brain, but Mao's China, the red scarf, maybe the red scarf girl. When you
Yeah, the
think
Red
about Mao's
Guard.
China, they wanted every child to be the same. They
Mhm.
created genderless outfits. They like everybody had to look the same. That was their portrait. So when you think about Portrait of a Graduate, think about cookie cutter kids.
Mm.
And if you will, a paint by number. And I did not get that analogy. I borrowed it from somebody. But Portrait of Graduate, think about it as a paint by number, where you do a little work here and you do a little work here and you do a little work here, and everybody's picture is the same. And
Mm.
so it's not about individual children, it's about outcome based education. And they want every child to look the same on the end because they're ultimately preparing for a revolution. They're trying to turn the voter tide in this thing. And I think it's important that parents remember that Portrait of a Graduate, or POG, is a nationally acclaimed program created by an Ohio based company called Battelle for Kids. If you don't know that, a lot of times it's proclaimed as this very grassroots thing. It's unique, it's not unique.
No,
It
it's not.
it was created by an Ohio-based company, and it's used to fundamentally transform the purpose, and that's a big word because when you ask the question, why do we send our kids to school? Do you go there, send them there so they can learn about grit or how to have grit? I don't send my kids for that, but maybe you do. But it's the purpose of U.S. education, and I'm quoting their website: shifting curriculum assessment and school accountability and data collection away from academics and toward social and emotional learning. So as you go through that and you look at that, you need to remember that Battelle is an applied science and technology company that uses technology to track behaviors. And when you get into tracking behaviors, you're getting into some Fourth Amendment shady crazy, because you've got some violation of privacy
Mhm.
by arms of the government. And make no mistake about it, your educational system is an arm of government. And so the program was incentivized through in 2015 through the ESSA Act, which replaced No Child Left Behind, came in under the Obama administration, pushed through there, right before Trump took office, and they're an extension of Common Core. You go on and you talk about the data quality campaign that is associated with POG, and it was instrumental in developing the state longitudinal data system, and I'm trying not to use acronyms, which is why I'm
Very
struggling
good,
to
very good.
pronounce words. Um, and so it's essentially used to extend that to track all sorts of social services and health needs. And then we've got the early intervention program that feeds, and if you've heard of Panorama, you know all about that.
Oh, yeah.
And then Portrait of a Graduate is the backbone to ultimately what will be a social credit score. And that's not something that I've made up. It's something that they have openly put out in their propaganda. And so it's also an ESG score for children. Knowledge Works is a Gates-funded organization, also interestingly based in Ohio, that our school board in Utah paid to facilitate. We paid Knowledge Works to facilitate the installation of Battelle's POG program, all the while claiming that it was unique to Utah, that it wasn't a national thing.
Right.
And so it sets the stage for many things that we don't want in our school, like CBE, competency-based education, PCBL, personalized competency-based learning, which is ultimately not related to academics. And so if you kind of just take that in a nutshell, and then you remember that POG in Utah includes things like grit, perseverance, um, tenacity. Well, the last time I wanted my child graded on those things in an educational institution was never. But we
Right.
need to remember that if your child is unique, they're not going to pass the POG seminar. And I think that if you remember that it's a collective goal for graduates and that their mindset, not their activity or not their outcome, is the requirement for success. They
Right.
have to change their mindset in order to be successful and pass the POG test. And there's so much in there, but the reality is people will claim, and it has been claimed live in our board meetings on the public record, that these are not meant to be measured. And I will tell you that they absolutely are. And I knew that a long time ago, but I most definitely knew after I went to NASB, because what I saw blew my mind. And we're going to blow your mind today, folks.
That's
So I
right.
think I think with that as a precursor, um, we'll just kind of go into what happened at NASB. And at NASB, I think the thing that got me was it's AI meets Portrait of a Graduate. Well, I have a pretty vast knowledge of POG, and so I thought, well, what can they possibly be doing with AI? I mean, they're already asking absurd questions of our children. They're asking for measurements of absurd things out of our teachers. What could make this any more horrible than it already is? And I will tell you that they talked about AI. Can we go to the first factory model one?
Yeah.
And so they start this presentation and they're talking about the factory model for schools is over. And I want to make it clear that the factory model of education and classical ed are distinctly different. So a lot of people will associate classical education with the factory model education, and that's not truthful. Classical ed is distinct and different from the factory model. And so if we can just have that clarity. So the factory model is over, but what they've tried to tip it to is inquiry-based ed. We'll just put math around the kids and they'll just, attach to it via osmosis. We'll put books in the classroom and kids will love to read. None of those things have ever happened. The idea that kids can construct learning out of their environment is erroneous. The most effective teaching model is explicit and direct instruction. And it
Yes.
might not be fancy and it might not be flashy, but it gets our students to the finish line. And so they start talking about this. And then they go into this idea about how we can measure, how we can measure unmeasurable things. And so I thought, oh boy, this is going to be interesting. How are they going to measure grit? I'd love to know. Boy, they showed me. Let's go on to the next one. It, it they talked about their idea of redesign and purpose in all of the things that they were doing was to get into kids' heads, to get into your child's head, literally to prompt them to disclose highly personal and highly private information. And it goes into an AI computer and it's analyzed, and then a score is spit back out for your student, and then they are prompted through an artificial intelligence machine how they can improve in this area. And so they went on to this whole vision and validation that they argued about the, and by argue I mean argued with themselves. They presented both sides of the issue about this. And then they went on to talk about the castle framework and all of these things. And if we go to the next one, she's marked these out really well. Integrated support systems, positive development in relationships, environments filled with safety and belonging. Well, if you've never been taught belonging, just imagine being in a room full of really bad mother-in-laws and you have to please them all. That
Yeah.
is that the belonging idea is that you should walk on eggshells while pleasing everybody else. But not just you have to do it, everybody else has to do it too. It's a really demented thing, so we can get into that later, but that whole idea of inclusion and belonging, healthy development, learning, thriving, rich learning experiences, and I would love for anyone to give me a definition of rich or deep learning.
Right.
How can you actually define that? I've asked that question over and over and over in my time on the board. Define for me what is deep learning and how is it measurable? What is rich learning and how is it measurable? Because I can tell you whether or not those children know their math facts, but what is deep learning of multiplication tables?
Right.
It's a question that you have to grapple with. And so if we go on to the next slide, um, they they start talking about the blueprint and this whole child thing. And if you don't know about whole child, it's the idea that you just give your baby over to the school and the school will develop their worldview, their values, their attitudes and beliefs, and they'll feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the whole child concept. And they talked about redesigning schools and that they would ultimately end up building something different. Ensure the build matches the blueprint on the lower right there, verifying efforts producing what the redesign promises. So they are trying to get the system to output a different type of child that thinks different from the next generation up. They want them to think differently from their parents. And that was made very, very clear. Let's go to the next slide really fast. And so they spoke very, very candidly about the prompt. And so they will grade gratitude. You might wonder, how do they grade gratitude? Well, there's a bot. And interestingly enough, this bot has to be a real human because I have learned that humans have what is called the uncanny valley. And the uncanny valley, if you look it up, is the place at which humans are distrustful of AI things because they can actually recognize them. And so they don't trust them. So they actually had to use a real human to prompt these students so that they could elicit more information from them. And the information is recorded on an electronic device and then stored on a server farm, and the data is analyzed repeatedly to tell the bot how to coach the students so that the system can color by number in the portrait that they want of the students in that new blueprint and plan of how they want those kids to be. And it's everything from tell us about a time that you had to try something multiple times and what did you do and how did you come across that or how whatever it might be. and they get kids to disclose highly private and personal information that goes into an AI machine, and then the system prompts them not just with a grade, but digging for more information on that. And then let's go to the next slide. And so when they go in and they define it, and that they say the portrait can only be realized, the portrait of the graduate can only be realized when it can be tracked and measured. And they have figured out a way to track and measure this. And it is for all learners. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I love that that's blown up so we can see it. So it talks about adaptability, the capacity to be modified for a new use or purpose. Can you just see my mind going
But just
poof like an
rewire your
emoji?
kid. Yeah.
Yes. Are we going to rewire our students? But yes, that is the goal. The goal is
Yeah.
to rewire them and to inform, in particular, their worldview, their values, attitudes, and beliefs. Critical thinking. We're going to rewire critical thinking, the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. The collaboration, the action of working with someone to produce or create something. In particular, Portrait of a Graduate in some standards across states, one of the standards for kindergarten math, or kindergarten writing rather, I apologize, for kindergarten writing is to collaborate in the writing process. I want you to just think about that really quickly. How does a kindergartner, who oftentimes is just learning their letters, collaborate in the writing process?
Right.
And so it goes into this perseverance, communication, many of the other ones, they call them 21st century skills or SEL skills, grit, tenacity, perseverance. I'm trying to think of some of them that are on ours, but they're just obscure things. How do you measure grit? Well, they've come up with a way. Let's go to the next slide. And they decided that they were going to have a study session and assessments that are authentic. Authentic meaning your child is giving information to a computer that is then going to be analyzed and put together. Relevant to their student's experience. They're relevant because they're real and they're unique to the child. Embedded in learning. This goes back and forth like a computer therapist that interfaces with your child. And then it supports student collaboration. And then the last one there I think is hilarious, to provide useful insights to teachers, students, and families. So they're going to tell you that your kid is terrible at something based on what an AI bot says. And
Unbelievable.
they go through this. Let's go to the next slide because it gets better. It ensures that the assessments and resources are culturally responsive. And I'm going to just blow your mind. They talked about how this was in like 400 languages. So not only is your child being prompted, but the AI tool can prompt and respond to your child in one of hundreds of languages. And then that information is put back into the AI bot and the server farm that they have for it to analyze it and then to compare it to other students and to reflex the language. Like it just blew my mind so that they can give feedback to teachers based on what they can do in their classroom. So when the students in a certain cohort are finished, they will send a message to the teacher, you need to teach this week. And then they send a message to guide like the strategic planning of an institution. The whole thing like blows your mind. And so it prioritizes capacity and knowledge in artificial intelligence. And I'm thinking, no duh. Let's go to the next one. It talked about an assessment system of intangible skills that was comprehensive and coherent, flexible and accessible. And by that, that means inside your house. You have a government computer prompting your child inside your home. And in my opinion, Marsha knows this about me, that's a huge violation of the Fourth Amendment. When
Yes.
you are asking students to show a computer the inside of their house for analyzation. I think it's very weird, personally. Other people may disagree with me and they can call me and make me smarter. But to innovate and to increase value and efficiency, which means efficiency doesn't mean less time. It means getting the portrait finished faster. So when they say value and efficiency, what they're talking is about is they want your child to meet their definition of values, attitudes, and beliefs that are attainable in the portrait as fast as possible. And then they're giving scholarships to students who achieve certain metrics in the portrait. Let's go to the next slide. Um, there are some people there that have consulted on this. Dr. Francisco, the former superintendent from San Diego, California, Daniel Bruin, the Impactor Pathway co-founder, they had some interesting things to say. Um, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Um, but it starts with this idea that the Likert scales miss the story. And if you don't know what a Likert scale is, it's usually the thing that says agree, neutral, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. And it's that scale. And sometimes it's put forth in different ways in different capacities, but that's a Likert scale. And they talk about how it misses the story. So they ask students to reflect. The device captures what they say and they analyze their personal growth over time. But don't think that it's personal growth, it's portrait growth, which is not your idea of who or what your child should become. It's the system's idea of who or what your child should become. Let's go to the next one unless you have something to say.
No, I'm fine.
And what kills me is if you see in the slide here, there's this 3D scatter plot that puts these all over in multiple dimensions. And it talks about machine learning. The machine listens at scale, clustering thousands of student reflections in a multidimensional space so patterns are heard and seen, which is how then they give feedback to the institution and the educator. And natural language processing understands what is said and works to extract the student's intent, emotion, and skill into an evidence-aligned rubric through Portrait of a Graduate Insights. So, as a person, if I don't understand what my friend Marsha is saying, I would say, tell me more about that or help me understand that. And the computer does that, but in a very different way. The computer's trained to ask certain questions to elicit a certain response from your child so that they can train them to color by number in that portrait. And then all of the data, including the video of them inside your home or wherever they're at, that is stored in that server farm. Let's go to the upper right-hand corner. I don't know if we can zoom in on that, or maybe that's the next slide. But notice that there's a score there. And they are literally scoring kids and giving them, I'm not joking, quote, blue ribbons
Wow.
to achieve in the Portrait of a Graduate framework. And this is alive and well. It's not a pilot. It's not something they were trying to sell. This has been activated in California, is in multiple school districts, and has been around for probably, I'm going to misspeak, over 5 years if I just do the quick
Mhm.
math. Well over 5 years. So this is not incoming. This is literally extending. It is franchising itself. And it is a social score that is applied to your student, and then they get to earn privileges inside the institution based on how an AI machine scores them. Let's go to the next slide. Um, oh, this is perfect. If I don't know if you see this lady down at the bottom, she is a real human. And basically what happens if I can relay this well, is they record her doing many, many things. She talks like a normal human talks with her hands and the whole bit, and has facial expressions and certain things. And then the AI bot uses all that video, and then she just talks. But they had to use a real human because the AI doesn't have the intelligence yet to surpass the uncanny valley. And the students don't respond to the bots the way they respond to real humans. And they spoke about this openly. And for example, the question there is, talk about a time you had to recover from an upset. How did you react when you failed? And what did you do to get back on track? So if you're thinking about, my mom died and I did all this, like totally inappropriate information for a child to be giving the government under the guise of academic instruction. Let's move to the next slide. So scenario pumps, how students surface their skills in context. And I see this arrow here, but I'm not certain what it's for. Marsha, can you tell me what that arrow is for?
Um, Hang on just a second. I don't know that I put that arrow on there.
Oh, well then I I apologize. I thought
Yeah.
that was you.
I mean,
So,
I do adapt a lot of videos, but I don't think I put that one on there.
okay. So they are given
Oh, it looks
feedback.
like it's pointing toward the play button to play it. But yeah, I know like if
Oh,
you do the QR code there, everybody, if
uh-huh.
you do the QR code, you can see one of their lessons. I did do that before.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a really interesting way that they engage the student. And we got to remember, these are minors. These are not adults. These are minor children giving away highly personal information that if you went to a therapist would be protected by law. And
Hmm.
here they're giving it to a machine to be extracted, and then that machine is acting as kind of a gateway therapist to prompt them in these skills to inform their values, attitudes, and beliefs, and then ultimately their worldview. And let's go on to the next one. If you just look in the right here, it talks about the ripple effects of kindness. And then we're going to go into, I would I would go to the next couple ones because I would love to see the ones. You see these two girls in these videos in the next, I believe it's the next one, Marsha,
Yeah.
where she's inside her home and the government it's like government surveillance inside the home. I want you to think about that. And she's talking about risk taking and resilience. Well, when you think about young girls and what they would share to their friends as opposed to their parents, what do you think they'd share with a computer if
Right.
they thought no one could see it? And this AI tool is coaching them on everything from taking risks in terms of, you know, driving crazy to sexual risk taking. And it's all feedback from an AI bot. Um, and then this lady at the next one, Georgia Scarlettis, she spoke about curriculum design. And in particular, she talked very openly about writing the correct prompt to elicit as much private information as possible from the student. And so she's skilled and she has multiple degrees or training and all sorts of stuff in how to elicit as much as humanly possible from the child taking this. Seeing in the next slide, it talks about seeing progress as growth turns, not yet, into next steps. It just was very disturbing to me. And if we go to the next slide, it's got an arrow here. It says, extract the natural language processing signals, growth mind score, Z score equals 1.9 or the 96th percentile. So they're telling this girl, everything you shared with us was so good, you got a 96%. And so students are being incentivized to share more and more private and personal information. And sometimes students will disclose things that are not truthful to earn those scores. And that is what causes me great consternation, which is a whole other webinar in and of itself.
Yeah.
Uh, but if we go to the next one, you'll notice that there's a dual axis rubric. And in this rubric, if you can see it closely, it's scoring empathy on the top. And I have this before we started. Something, I can't read it right now, but that doesn't matter. But they're scoring these things on a rubric, and you can have exemplary empathy. Don't know if you knew that or not, but you can, and you can get a scholarship for your exceptional empathy. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, before we move on, this is Harvard's framework. This is another framework that's being measured, making caring common. You might see it in the acronym MCC. So that's another thing, and it's just more of the same, more SEL stuff. So it's yeah, it's crazy.
It, yeah, it is crazy. The next slide talks about from raw input to real impact. So their goal, and they discuss this openly, that the goal is to get your child to be unfiltered, completely unfiltered, to tell this machine anything and everything, because only when they know the machine knows your child deeply and intimately, quoting there, that can the machine have real impact on the world at large through these portrait of a graduate frameworks. Just mind blowing stuff. And it says over on the right, a machine learning pipeline filters, maps, and models student voice at scale, turning reflections into patterns that reveal what skills learners have gained so they can tell how much impact they're having in an institution based on what these students disclose. I suppose if the students wanted to spoof the computer, perhaps they could try, but um, it looks like they're asking them pretty intimate things. In the next slide, we're talking about quantifying what portrait evidence looks like. And if you look on the right, every student has these things. Now, in the state of Utah, we do have social credit scores through our Panorama system already sitting at our Utah State Board of Education. They were disclosed publicly through the Senate Ed Committee a couple years back. They do still exist. and um, and so if you look closely at this, you can see that there's a spectrum, there's dots, they tell you how you can improve the areas that the student is low in, and they put them on a graph, all on intangible skills. And then students are rewarded. If you go to the next slide, the machine will reward them. So if you get a certain skill, you can be the kindness captain, and then you ultimately have quote unquote power at your institution where you get to reward other people based on your learning from the machine. If you're tracking me with what I'm saying there, it's a super interesting thing. I love that Miss Marsha has put this as a kindness captain, your heart knows no bounds. It's the next slide. Your compassion enriches the lives of everyone around you, from friends to strangers to the world at large. You are the go-to person for a caring word and a helping hand, making you a beacon of goodwill and humanity. But you have to earn it.
Yeah. This is
It's
dystopian. It just
it's
is.
very weird. And if you go to this next slide, the thing that kept catching me was that these are students in private spaces. Most of these, this young man appears to be inside the school, but most of these videos appeared to be inside homes. And if you look at the thing, compassion, curiosity, how do you grade curiosity? Can I
Right.
just ask everyone that for a moment? Gratitude, they are assessing and grading gratitude. Grit, growth mindset. Perspective taking, they are grading your child's perspective on issues through this program. Purpose, whether or not your child has the correct and appropriate purpose in their life. And, you know, in my home, we honor God above all else. Our
Right.
purpose is to glorify God, and everything else comes second to that. Not so in the Portrait of a Graduate. So if you are a Christ-loving, God-fearing home, this is something you should be concerned about. And then self-control is the next one on this grid. And trust me, this is only one grid. There's lots of grids. And this young man has earned a 686 impactor score, and he's only 22% through the course. And that score goes on and on through multiple pathways all the way through the 12th grade. And they shared with us, if you go to the next one, they're going to claim that these portrait skills equal academic gains. I don't believe that they showed anything resembling evidence of this. And I asked a number of questions after the fact and was totally unconvinced that this could be equated to academic gains. But they talk about that high portrait scores like purpose are linked to good attendance. If you look on the on the orange there in the circle, they link purpose to attendance. They link self-control to student behavior, grit to the graduation rate, growth mindset to their standardized test scores. They link compassion to student engagement in the classroom. I'm not certain that kids do their math because they care about other people.
Right.
And if you think about compassion in a biblical context, it means to suffer with.
Yeah.
Maybe they're suffering together through math class. I don't know. That was kind of a joke. But gratitude is enrollment in advanced courses. So somehow they've linked kids that are thankful to taking AP classes. It's just things that you go, really? And then curiosity is linked to academic achievement, and perspective taking, believe it or not, is linked to their English proficiency. So just some super sketchy stuff that you kind of go, huh. But asking questions is not something they really wanted you to do. If you go to the next page, you'll see that they grade all of these things. And on the right there, it talks about ownership. And you can get a really great score in ownership. In fact, in terms of ownership, this learner profile is blue, and that means that they exceed expectations in taking ownership. They're grading empathy, but this person is only green in empathy, so they're not very good. In resilience, they're ticking up to the blue here. Self control, they're only green. Safety and belonging. I have this blown up really big on my screen, by the way. That's the only reason I can read these. Safety and belonging, they're popping up there. And then in self regulation. But all of these things are not things that are observed, they're things that the student self discloses. So you have to remember, like as an educator, when I see students in the classroom, I say, man, let's just call my student Johnny. Johnny, you've really been working hard on that. They picked on you and you didn't respond at all. And then did you notice who was disciplined? It was the other person because you didn't hit anybody. That's awesome. But here, it's not based on observation, it's based on disclosure. And so it's just super interesting things. And then if we go to what I believe is probably one of the final slides, you'll notice that there's an entire report for these students. And then they talked about how an individual, I don't know if it was exactly this individual, but that there was an individual who earned a scholarship to the University of Southern California based solely on their learner portrait score, and that was a common thing because they wanted students entering college with the right mindset. And
Wow.
with that, I think if we go to the next one, oh, you're already there. Curious and connected. She's sporting up 133. This girl doesn't have it going on, man. Somebody should talk to her. Being kind. She has self-disclosed that she is kind so much that she is in the blue. In terms of being confident, boy, we need to have a conversation with her. She's only green there. But regardless, and I'm joking. I hope that everybody catches the sarcasm in my
Yeah.
voice. But the point is that they're measuring these things. And this server farm, I had asked about, you know, this server farm, how big is it? And he talked about a single institution could have a server farm that's at least 4 by 4. So it'd be 16 square blocks. Like it's that big that these server farms get so much information that they're just massive and they're just compiling it and analyzing it all the time and they're constantly changing the instruction based on that constant input. And when you think about the power of AI or even the Facebook or Twitter algorithm and how it's constantly changing what you're seeing in your feed based on what you look at,
Right.
think about that 100 times worse because these students are not just getting prompted based on what they disclose, they're getting prompted based upon what their peers disclose, and if their peers mention them, what their teacher comments on their profile, all sorts of different things. And so I'm open for feedback. I'm open for Marsha to tell me I'm wrong. But it
No.
just mind blowing experience to
Mm,
sit there and say, you know, I have always wanted to get rid of POG here in Utah.
yeah.
I've brought it up 3 times, been denied 3 times, because we just don't have the votes to make something like that happen in our state. But this was a mind blowing
Unbelievable.
thing to watch, and to have them just state these things as if this was normal behavior, and that we should we should just jump onto this train, this POG train, this AI POG train. It was just mind blowing to me. But that is what I have for you today, Marsha, and hopefully I have met your expectations in that
Oh,
presentation.
you have exceeded them. You absolutely have exceeded them. And, as you've been going through this, I mean, I'm just thinking 1984.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never watched the movie 1984, it's on YouTube. You can watch it for free. But it gives you an idea of the surveillance state. And that's basically what this is. And then they're rewarding these kids with all these little carrots and trinkets, these names, kindness captain, all of that. It was it's very interesting that just this past week that Zoran Mamdani was, sworn in, and his big quote that has just been viral on social media this week has been about taking frigid individualism and turning it into warm collectivism, pretty much. And I am here. I mean, it has said this all throughout this entire presentation. This is collectivism, and this is one of
Mhm.
the words that you really should delve into to understand how communism, the overwhelming things that are happening in our country from so many things, all of this is planned. This is a World War III, in my opinion. We are in an information war, and that's exactly, our children are right in the midst of it. So, what do we do as a community but use our own tools? So, I find it very interesting that they are going to use AI against us with our students. Well, we're going to use AI against them because one of the great things about getting this information is, I've taken information from this series where she had listened in on it, and we've popped a transcript into Grok, okay, for this particular uh, session that she attended. And I think you'll find this very interesting as I thumb through it. And because here's the other thing, following this NASB conference with the state school board members, right?
Mhm.
Well, next month in February is the AASA, the American Association of School Administrators. Did I get
Yes,
that acronym right?
I believe so.
It used to just be called the Superintendents Association, I believe. Well,
Mhm.
Superintendents Association, they combined forces with Battelle for Kids. So now if you go to battelleforkids.com or whatever they are on their website, you will be forwarded to AASA. So next month is AASA's conference, and
Okay, I'm going to
POG.
stop you. You just said something I didn't know. So if
Oh,
you go
really?
to Patel for Kids, now it's the AASA?
Yes, yes. As of July, they combined. So think of how this is on such steroids. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what's going on.
Well,
So
and if
you
it's the AASA, you know it's big because then it's being pushed out into schools from the top down. People have to
exactly,
remember their local boards and their state boards really don't govern education. They're governed by third parties and associations and all sorts of rogue associations that push things down and through. Um, I would offer that you don't really get representative government in terms of your school. That's my
exactly.
opinion.
You don't. And see, they need to make us think that we have local control. And I believe that's one of the reasons for the smoke screen of POG is to satisfy that need that people have to think that they control, the local areas. But it's like you said, it is the cookie cutter paint by number child they're producing.
Hmm.
And it's also just a smokescreen to try to make parents settle down because public schools have taken such a hit by people like us and other people that are on
Hmm.
social media. I have great friends across the nation that do a lot of this same work. So, anyway, next month is the AASA conference, national conference. Everyone should find out if their superintendent will be attending that conference. If you already have POG seated in your school, well, you know that your superintendent is aligned with this way of thinking, and you can now have a very um, formal discussion after kind of let this just digest and settle in your mind as you just soak this up. One thing I did go through, like I told you, I put all of the transcript of that session in Grok. And I used specific instructions with Grok, as you'll see written in the red at the bottom of the screen. Grok was consulted to provide an assessment of the conference transcript on the session above. Instructed to use strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science from educational research, policy analysis, and recent studies, which were just this past year's. It provided the following information. I have 8 things where it talks about the dangers of this particular rollout. It's an updated list. The dangers are evaluated deductively from system design. And you can read all of this yourself. And what I'm doing is just kind of talking through this because we're already approaching an hour. But I'm going to have this because, we always post our videos on parentsonthelevel.com. You can also find them on Protect Ohio Children YouTube page. So that's where you'll find this, and you can share it as many times as you like. We really do ask that you follow, like, and share our pages because we are getting cutting edge information to you. I mean, there's a lot of people that have great networks. But when you're looking at people that are producing content like this is what's needed in order to stand toe to toe with your superintendent, which is what's needed in every locale. So here's some of the dangers. You've got privacy and data security risk, algorithmic bias and inaccuracy leading to unfair labeling. You can come back and read all of this as we go through. The third one, erosion of human judgment and teacher autonomy. What did you call the valley?
The uncanny valley.
Yes, the uncanny valley. I'm going to have to really let that one, all of these new terms I'm learning. Psychological harm and surveillance effects. We have talked about this on our previous videos, webinars, a lot, like securely discern, Go Guardian, Gaggle. Goodness, Gaggle is a surveillance system, Christina, that actually has their own little counselor online. They can talk to her or him in their bedroom if they want. Yeah, it's crazy. So you've got all of these things, when you're constantly surveilled, what does that do to the psyche of a child? I mean, gosh. Number five, exacerbation of inequities and digital divide, because not all districts have the same access, of course. Over reliance and diminished critical thinking and creativity. If you're going to be molded a certain way by this portrait, where's creativity go? I mean, what are
Well,
your
it
thoughts on that?
it goes in the toilet, but ultimately they grade their creativity. And I think if we remember that it's a paint by number or a cookie cutter kid, they want them to fill out that cookie cutter. They don't want them to think outside the box. They want them to think within the box. So when they're talking about creativity, they're talking about molded thinking. They're not talking
Mhm.
about what you and I would consider creative thinking or unique thinking or just I remember one class I taught, it was about 10 years ago, and I thought, these kids have not yet been beat down by middle school because they were so creative in their thought and in their ideas and in their word writing and in their development of lyrics. When we do a lyrics unit in my class where I challenged them to write that, they were so all over the place and so creative. It was one of the funnest years I've ever had.
Wow.
And but I distinctly recall that. But when they talk about grading creativity, they're not talking about what you and I would call creativity. They're talking about filling up how you think. The box of how you think needs to be filled up, but you can only be creative within the boundaries that the system sets for you.
Wow. Wow. And you know what that really brings to my mind as well? Warren Wiersbe, Bible translator and pastor and
Yeah.
commentator, just a fantastic pastor. One of his favorite quotes that he used to say was, they use your vocabulary, but not your dictionary. And that's the thing about a lot of these terms. They are using words that don't mean to you what they really mean. So that's something very important. And that's throughout the school system, not just POG. So, all right, next. Unintended societal control and indoctrination risks. I mean, this is Grok. This isn't mine. This is Grok coming out with this. Because I asked him, what are the dangers? Implementation and cost burdens. Yeah, because we just have lots of money. I have heard more people complaining about the rising taxes because now you've got all of these bells and whistles with all this digital stuff, and then too, all of the things they've done with the buildings across the nation. It's just crazy how much money we've spent on schools. But then when you put this in and you have to build data centers, and it's interesting when you first talked with me about this when we were talking by phone, and you
Hmm.
told me, Marsha, they're calling them data lakes. I'm like, a lake of data. That's what prompted my design on the front cover of this, the Soul Scanner. Grok came up with the name. even of this webinar, which I thought was chilling because it literally, this AI is scanning the souls of our children and
Hmm.
molding their values, attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, all of it. So this is crazy interesting when you come back and just really break it down. So here's the alert. This is the overall danger that Grok has assigned. Overall danger level is high. Benefits in general personalization are probable, or hang on a minute, I'm in this is probably
Probabilistic.
that word, boy, okay. A 60% efficacy in pilots. So you're going to have, I mean, is that saying to us that 40% of this is just going to be whacked, but they're going to go with it anyway, Christina? I mean, is that what you're thinking? So,
Yeah.
the harms, though, read through that, but harms are systemic, long term, and difficult to reverse, especially in politicized or resource constrained settings. Mitigation requires rigorous independent audits, opt outs, transparency, and human oversight, but scaling inherently amplifies risks. I mean, get your kids out of these schools. This is they are out of their lane completely and off their rockers to think that if they know that if parents understood the depths of this, that their hair would be on fire. And that's what I hope will happen as a result of sharing this video, sharing everything we've discussed. And hopefully, we'll be able to break down even more in the upcoming months. Christina, I have enjoyed just the go between, and I think that this right
Thank
here
you.
is going to be definitely something everyone's going to have some questions about. So, anyway, fire away, Miss Diane. You're up with questions.
So before I do the questions, if I kind of encapsulate this and recap what I heard here tonight into
Mhm.
three pieces, it's disclose, 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 and incentivize the kids to disclose.
Mhm.
Secondly, customized coaching to the kids to make them be that cookie cutter kid. And
Mhm.
lastly, ranking and rating the kids for career and college placement. Is that the way you would see it?
In a distillation, I think you did very well.
Yes.
So that being the case, what you showed us is taking place in California. Can you give us a sense of how widespread this is in California and beyond?
Um, so you can help me recall, Marsha, because I know you've heard the recording of it.
Mhm.
Um, it is pretty pervasive in California. They were fully installed into huge, huge school districts. So, like the Salt Lake City School District serves about 18,000 students and it's small. But when you're looking at La Vista School District in California, it's huge. It's
Mhm.
massive. And it's pervasive in California and they're rolling out. He talked about three or four other states. I can't name them in this moment, but Portrait of a Graduate is everywhere.
It
The
is.
AI section might be hitting its push. You know, it's gaining its momentum on the rollout. But make no mistake about it, the early intervention systems are also doing this kind of work to develop social credit scores for your children, and they are also everywhere. There was what I call franchise legislation that came out of the NCSL a few years back, and by a few years, I mean like 12 years ago. And it just lambasted the nation. And what's called the early intervention and warning system is a social credit score producing system by a very specific company that I'm sure you all know the name of. But it also produces a social credit score. And so even though that is not directly linked, it was actually in that very first graphic when Marsha said, I know you've seen this before. We've talked about Castle, we've talked about these, and we are here. In that very first one, she talks about the early intervention system. I believe it's on that screen. And
Mhm.
my whole point in saying that is the AIPOG might be, 7 years in. But that does not mean Portrait of a Graduate is not 20 years old and all over the place. It's not just in states, it's in individual districts, which is usually linked to your state. So it's not something that's new. The AI stuff is pretty embedded. Did I answer that question correctly and
Yes.
to your satisfaction?
Yes, thank you. And I would just
Okay.
ask the audience, if you find it in your school district, please alert us to that. In Ohio, you can send tips to tips@protectohiochildren.net. And we'd love to get some real examples in our states and communities around that. The questions are coming in. How are school counselors involved with this?
So I would offer that school counselors are often, especially in elementary schools, they do the SEL segments. So they're the ones that go in and do the little group circles and they do the life skills lessons. Well, if you have POG, a lot of those, especially if you're using this AI framework, those are developed and shipped out by AI to the counselor, and then they take the lesson into the classroom. It's really no different than what they're doing now with the early intervention and warning systems, where they get data from that, and then they'll go in and the system will spit out, hey, based on this criteria and these questions that your teachers have answered, you should be talking about this, 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 and this. It's just, it's exacerbated 6,000 times over that, but it's counselors are involved in both aspects, both the current and this impending AI takeover of the student mind, if you will. Um, they're there in both capacities. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank
You
you.
can tell I'm in politics. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
So, questions again, and I think you've already answered this, but it's worth repeating. This presentation tonight, this webinar, will it be available? Yes, absolutely. It will be on the Protect Ohio Children YouTube. It will be on Parents on the Level. Marsha, will you be able to also include the presentation deck, PowerPoint
Yes.
deck? That would be
Yes.
very
Glad to.
helpful. Comment from Alexis, this is rampant in college.
That
Oh, yeah.
doesn't surprise me.
And what advice do you have for state legislators?
Ooh, is
Any,
that my
any,
Noelle?
yes,
I think I know her. I think I've met her rather than know her. My advice for state legislators is first of all, work on repealing code. Many of our legislators, they work on adding more to the code lines. If you can get your early warning system out of code, I would jump for joy and come and celebrate with you. Because if you can get those things out of code, Utah code has kind of a pseudo portrait or a vision for public education. We want Utah graduates to be X, 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 and X. Well, that's codified POG. And if you can get that stuff out of your code, that would be huge. I would also say that if you've got anything in your code that mandates personalized competency based learning or PCBL, work on repealing that. Work on repealing CBL, which is competency based learning. Work on repealing anything that has to do with the invasion of the student home. And I know that early warning systems sounds good, but I could do a whole presentation on the hows and whys of why they're using the same words, but they're using a different dictionary. I'm going to use that
Exactly.
repeatedly. So getting those repeals in there, and I'd be happy to sit down with any state legislator from across the nation and talk to them more about the things that they can be doing. I asked our state legislature a couple of years ago. I said, please make this the year of the repeal. If you
yeah,
did nothing this year, even though we have huge problems in Utah, big. I mean, there's no secret. We make the news all the time for the crazy in our state. But I said, if you do nothing else, make this the year of repeal. Just repeal bad code.
The
And
other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on with you as well is how these administrators or teachers, counselors, whatever they are at the school, the educators, they are hiding behind students. The peer-to-peer counseling and the project-based learning where they're using and developing the little activist leaders within the schools and putting them back
mhm,
through to be in those groups where they are teaching those things that might be kind of touchy, maybe
mhm,
having to do with sexuality, orientation, gender identity, anything like that, where a teacher could say, oh, well, they must have talked about that in group. not I didn't teach it, but that it's
Hmm.
being taught somehow. There's some things to that as well, from my understanding, when I'm speaking with some parents, because they're like the peer to peer. I mean, there's no way you can opt out of this stuff anymore.
No,
People talk
it's
about opt outs all the time. That is a moot point at this point.
it is embedded, and it is
Mhm.
embedded, and in Utah they do something that I like to call placation code. So they will write laws and they will be actually well written. They're very poetic. And, people who are struggling with what's happening inside schools, they're like, yeah, 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 yeah. But if you don't actually read the code, you don't realize that they exempt it and accept it into nothingness. So when you're reading code line, you don't just want to read what the code line says, you want to read through every exception and every exemption to the code. And just as an example, it was 2 legislative sessions ago, we had a legislator run a bill about DEI. And it was supposedly this anti DEI law that was supposed to get rid of all this crazy stuff. But they had so many exceptions and exemptions in this law that it basically had no effect at all in K 12 instruction. And
Surprise.
so if you're a legislator and you're looking at this, you need to really work hard at why are we accepting these? Why is it okay except? Why are these people exempt but the rest of the world is not? And in particular, ours had to do with federal funding, that any institution that accepted federal grant monies was exempt from the law. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't know any public school that doesn't accept federal money. And so you have to really look at your code. But yeah, advice for legislators, repeal, 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 because chances are your schools are mandated by law in some form or fashion to participate in this. Our schools were mandated by the Utah State Board of Education to produce a portrait, and I worked my booty off and I got that part out. But I tell you, it came at a high cost and it took me a year to get it done. But it has since been removed. Our schools still do it, but they are not mandated to do so. To get it removed is a whole other realm of political jockeying.
So the question is coming through about RFPs and contracts, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that this software curriculum is running district-wide? Is it statewide? How would you be finding this? District by district?
I would answer that both. There's a state POG in our state, and there's also district-wide POGs. This software in particular, that when I talk about the early warning software, our state has a contract for that software, and so the state governs the contract, but our school districts use it, and there's a special formula in how they pay for it and use it. But I would say both, because there's different capacities that allow that to get into your system. And sometimes there won't be a vendor at your local level, but the vendor contract is held at the state level. And so it's kind of this wicked web of crazy that you have to figure out.
Okay, so we're going to have to do some research in our individual states and districts on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Question about this video. As a follow-up to this webinar today, the link to the video will be in the email that goes out, thanking everyone for joining, and those who did not join, there will be a link to the webinar. So any feedback that anyone has would be appreciated in the survey that they'll be receiving. And also, Christina, how can people get in touch with you if they have questions?
Um, I th- I would just I know this is going to go public. You're welcome to email me at the state board, and then I can give you my private information from there. I did not know. I just, like I said, I kind of went viral, and it wasn't purposeful. Uh, and so I don't have all these things turned on my social media. I just am
So,
not too into it. So I would just have them email me at christina.boggess@schools.utah.gov, and then I
okay.
can connect with them through a private channel outside of that, just remembering that everything they send there can be grammared. and is
Okay, and
open to the public record.
we can help facilitate that as well if people want
Yeah.
to send to Marsha,
Yeah.
Yeah,
parentsonthelevel.com.
because I'm happy to communicate with people. I am reluctant to put my private email address and my phone number
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
I
out on a
understand.
YouTube
Absolutely.
video.
Well,
So,
it sure has been a pleasure having you, and we appreciate it
Absolutely.
so much.
well,
And
thank you.
and so I think with that, we'll call it a wrap for today, and we look forward to in the future having you again sometime.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it more than you know.
Yeah.
Anything,
Next month.
Marcia, to end this?
Yeah. Next month, we are looking at can you opt out of all of this stuff? I kind of gave you a spoiler earlier, but we're going to look into that and we'll probably break down a couple of things that we kind of went over in this session as well. So if any of you have ideas about opt-outs and things like that, shoot me some lines at parentsonthelevel@gmail.com. I always love to hear feedback from you guys. I appreciate so much all of you that reach out and ask questions and
Mm.
and feed things to our heat map in Ohio. My goodness, if you've never gone on protectohiochildren.net and looked at the heat map for your area, if you're from Ohio, my goodness, you need to look at that. So we all partner and we try to cover as best as we can. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. We'll be back at our regular time at 1 p.m. Unless you hear differently from us. We might get some kind of a big response from this and be able to do a follow-up. We don't know. We'll just play it by ear, but what I have scheduled is opt out. So we'll keep you informed. Make sure that you just keep an eye peeled for your emails. So God bless. Thanks so much again, Christina.
Oh,
And we'll
thank
be
you.
praying for you and all that you're going through right now too. Y'all take care.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
You too. Bye bye.